thanks to Unimatrix, Pak Joni, Bu Desi for the invitation, and it's also a pleasure to join this group to share a little bit about some of the study and career journey. As Bu Desi mentioned, I'm ASEAN Capital Market Lead, Director Pasar Modal untuk Accenture. I also co-founded and been chairing a Global Indonesia Professional Association for Indonesian professionals and executives working across G20 and ASEAN after I co-founded the UK professional hubs called BPI UK. So it's an interesting journey, right? Because I think what I'm going to do in terms of sharing my personal journey, and I think what I like to do is also to compare with what's happening today and with today's situation, how perhaps some of you that have perhaps kids, sons and daughters, and how you may want to prepare your sons and daughters into pursuing higher education in the UK, perhaps, because I think all of the panel speakers here are UK based, has attained UK higher education. So I started off with someone that are very open. I know that I want to go to pursue higher education abroad. At the time, I got unconditional offer from a couple university in Australia, a couple university in the UK, as well as one in the US. And I decided, my parent and I, we decided to go for the UK because the more we look at it, the more we thought it is very cost effective when it comes to only 3 years of undergraduate degree. Means that you don't need to spend 4 years education in the US, or in fact in Indonesia you have to pursue for 4 years. So I think that's the duration of undergraduate is very important, because you could do a lot with in 1 year. So 25% savings on the duration of the higher education plus saving of the living cost is super attractive. And just looking back and just fast tracking what happened was, I started my higher education in the UK at the peak of the sovereign debt crisis in Europe. So Euro and British pound sterling, the two currencies in UK and Europe, are probably at their lowest in a few decades, and that means every rupiah we have value more in pound sterling, which means it's even more cost effective compared to Australia, where I believe it was one of the highest FX rates. So I think what I want to land is the cost effectiveness. But what I found after deciding from Petra to Christian Senior High School, so I graduated from Petra Manyar, and then really weighing on which university I should go, and because that cost effectiveness reason, I went to the UK route. Little did I know, once I was there, I realized the power of the Russell Group University and being part of the top UK higher educations leading in science and academic. It's truly superb. I think, I'm sure Fahita and Haikal can share a little bit about their study experience at the Russell Group universities that are equivalent to the Ivy League in the US. It's truly quite remarkable. And what I also found, the distinctive period between UK higher education, UK universities, and say Australia or Singapore, the students are exposed with such a high diversity in terms of our fellow students at the time, so that I interact more with the Brits, with the Europeans, with other international students that are truly diverse. So I suppose when I was a university student, we're really forced to adapt and to interact and compete in a truly diverse setting. And I think that is one of the transferable skills that have allowed me to start developing some of the skills and expertise that I, even until today, I use in my career. So after I graduated from University of Leeds, I moved down to London. I worked at UBS Investment Bank in London office, And then before I moved to Accenture Strategy, where I ran our ASEAN capital market based out of London, but covering Southeast Asia. So that's a little bit about my personal journey. Now, reflecting what's happening today in this pandemic world, I think parents and students alike need to perhaps be a little bit more strategic. And I think this is something I would have done as well around their study experience and linking with a future career aspiration. In Surabaya, in my batch, the parents, the kids, they don't really think about career. They just want to think about, okay, which subject I want to study, which university I want to go for, and that's it. There is no really linkages with future career aspiration. My suggestion is that to really think and reflect on how COVID-19 and the pandemic really impacted the world. What I truly believe in, future of workforce has arrived. It's no longer in the future, it has arrived today. And I think we need to do something about it. There are more than 50% of jobs that may no longer exist in a few years' time, right? I mean, when we keep talking about the future, it sounds like so far away, but it actually has arrived. More people work at home, and then the sense of collaboration is truly amazing. So what I'm keen to touch on is really how the parent can empower the kids, the sons and the daughters, to really think about what sort of future career aspiration and try to work backwards, right? Based on that type of career aspiration that are super relevant in a post-digital world, what sort of things a student should really be learning at. Because again, what I'm hoping that everyone here can get out, I think university education is super important, but how we empower the kids so that they can make the right decision throughout those universities, and in the end, their future is in their own hands. They will be competing in a different landscape with a different sets of demographics, I suppose, as we enter in a much more tough. Now, what they will also see, I'm just thinking, I want to challenge everyone here that we shouldn't really be thinking about what's happening in the next few months and the point of offer, but I'm also thinking about investing our efforts and time to really thinking about that 3 or 4 years journey. At the end of the higher education, you graduate, they'll be entering a rather tough job market. Yes, they may be able to start a job, but a very tough job market. What we saw in the UK and Europe, for example, the global financial crisis that occurred 2008 create a prolonged impact. What we've seen in Europe and the UK, there has been a decade of stagnation, whereas we saw low growth, low inflation, bit of trickle here, growth and there, right? But imagine if the world is seeing a low growth or stagnation across the US. They just contracted by about 30% of the GDP growth in Europe and perhaps somewhat in Asia. Hopefully Asia recover fast. What's that job market going to look like? How can we prepare the students that will be coming into the higher education to prepare themselves, because the future workforce has arrived? Probably that's a remarks from me, Budesian, sharing a little bit more my own journey and how I see today's challenges.
Okay, I've got two questions for you, Stephen, before we move on to Bung Haikal. Right,
Sure.
Toward the end of your undergrad in the UK, specifically at Leeds University, were you thinking to go back to Indonesia, or you want to, right, we have a post-study after this, the UK things. So were you at the crossroads, whether should I go back to Indonesia or should I would try to my luck, to do my things here? And then you mentioned that you went down to London to try your luck. So can you tell about that? And perhaps the IELTS preparations. This is sort of the, we call it the hurdle of most of Indonesian students who wants to continue their study in the UK, because as you know, they cannot play around with the IELTS. This is one of the proficiency of their English, whether they are good or not, to be accepted at the UK university. So is there any advice for those who are still struggling to get the right scores of IELTS to be able to get the letter of acceptance from the UK universities?
Sure. No, I'm happy. Perhaps let me cover the last question first, then I
Sure.
come, because I think that's chronologically what I found.
Mhm.
I think what I saw a lot in my batch, during Petra Manyar times, the focus of most parents and students are passing the IELTS score, and their focus is meeting the benchmark in order to get from conditional offer, where you get the offer but you have to meet certain criteria, into unconditional offer. And in the UK at the time, the benchmark was not particularly high. I think maybe 6, I think, or something like that.
Now it's 6.5 to 7.
Now 6.5 to 7. Now,
Depends
this is
on
how I would argue.
Yeah.
I think meeting a benchmark no longer should be what they're aiming for. What they should be aiming for is aiming 1+ from what they're achieving. My point is that in order to truly harness the value of an overseas study experience, you need to really be outperforming the rest of, say, your peers. Not only you should be, say, better than the rest of international students, the Chinese, the Singaporean, the Malaysian, but how can you be at the same level of playing field with the British or the home students, right? And I think what I found, those who are borderline, mepet-mepet begitu ya, atau kayak bandnya all 7 begitu, tapi masih ada beberapa yang 6 atau 6,5. I don't know how this works these days, but I think at least university, you have the overall, and then in one of the items in listening and writing, you shouldn't get lower than whatever. But I don't know what's happening now, but I'm sure those who are borderline may likely to be struggling, right? And my point is that what I found, those who are seeking support and help and actually trying to complement their, don't get me wrong, Petra Manyar is one of the best high school in Surabaya. That is not enough to providing a good English level of proficiency. Just very honest, right? I mean, I'm not going to debate about the curriculum imposed on the high schools that we went in Indonesia, but I think in order for us to reach that number, whether you want to get help from the school or external support, I think that is super efficient. And what I found, those who are thriving are those who are adept in academic English, or English for academic purposes, EAP, I call it, and something that I just don't feel you gain throughout your 3 years or in high school, SMA 1, SMA 2, SMA 3. That's what I felt. So try to outperform at least +1 than what's required, and then you will have a competitive advantage. Then you could make the most of your study experience. That would be my personal view, and how my hurdles was I got maybe a couple, not just one, but a couple external support that I had in order to boost my IELTS, plus that English for academic purposes. And before that too, I have always been involved in English debating. So I think communication is very important, and I think doing something for fun, such as a debating club, is always things that are a plus, I would imagine. You are using your English outside of this type of courses, which is always nice. So that's a little bit about the debating side of things. Happy to share a little bit, because I went on a national competition held by UI for all of the high schoolers or all across Indonesia, and I was the best speaker too. So that is a bit of that in terms of how my, around things just quite align, I suppose. And in terms of life after university, yeah, so you're absolutely right. So my batch, and perhaps Haikal batch too, we were one of the very first year where we were not eligible for post-study work visa at the time. So the government took out or removed a post-study work visa that would have allowed us to work or to have 2-year stay after graduating from undergraduate or postgraduate. So I didn't have that. Means that people in my year, it's getting much more difficult to get a job in the UK. Now, my thought processes was, going back to Indonesia, going back home is always the default, because Indonesia will not going to say no, me returning back. I have masih passport Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
And they're just not going to go back, and the default position is always there. That's why I try to focus in make a strategic bet in working in the UK, where I could in relevant industry based on my expertise, and trying to really go all routes, apply to so many different applications and network quite a lot with different people, attending different sessions. And it turns out that investment banking was my route, and then I joined financial services practice in Accenture strategy. But again, it starts what the good news that I'm keen to share is that since Boris Johnson government, they have reintroduced the post-study work visa for incoming international students from this September 2020.
Yes.
So for the new students, after they graduate either S1 atau S2, they have 2 years eligibility to stay, and they can work in whichever UK-based companies without visa sponsorship.
Yeah.
Where in my case, UBS or Accenture had to sponsor me. They spend an extra 5K plus health services, and they have to cover a lot more. It's more expensive to hire international student or non-EU citizens like myself. But I think overall, with PSW or without PSW, I would still advocate for Indonesians trying to generate global impacts outside of Indonesia. We have too many Indonesians in Indonesia right now with 250 million, 260 millions already, and we don't have enough Indonesians working abroad. And I think contributing back to Indonesia can be in so many different forms. Asalkan jiwa masih merah putih, kita masih tetap bisa selalu berkontribusi.
Yeah.
Di Indonesia, ya kan? And I think that's what we could do, and that's what I think I always aspire to motivate other professionals.
Semangat kemerdekaan ya, Stephen ya.